Hello everyone. This week's lecture recording from me will focus specifically on your second assessment for this unit. Your other lecture material includes a podcast episode on intergenerational justice. Please make sure you also listen to that in preparation for the week 4 tutorial. Okay, I will just begin by going over the purpose of this assessment. I know not many people like group work or presentations, but it is important because whilst it will help you with these first objectives, developing your ability to research and analyse a specific case study or issue, apply theory and concepts from the course, and develop your ability to explore potential remedies to environmental justice issues, and inform analysis of the causes of these issues. Being able to work in a group and present your work in a digestible, interesting way is a really important skill for wherever you end up going in the future. This assessment also specifically relates to these 3 course learning outcomes. I'm not going to read them out because you can read them out, but just so you know, these are really the objectives as well and the predicted outcomes of this assessment. So you will ideally work in groups of 3 people, and this is ideal because this assessment has 3 main components. I'm going to roughly go over what those components are, but I will go into more detail later in this lecture because we expect a lot more collaboration than this, but this is just the general idea of those 3 components. So the first is to carefully research a case study of the group's choosing. One individual, roughly again, but I'll go over that later, will have to gather credible information on this case study and both write and present an advanced overview of it. This member will also have to make sure that the 2 other members fully understand the case so they can complete their component of the assessment and the assessment is coherent as well. And this is where some collaboration might come in as well. For example, one member that's responsible mostly for another part of the assessment might find a really good article and think you should integrate it into your overview, and you can then collectively work to resolve that. From this member, it is important to be clear. So what has happened, who did it happen to, where did it happen, what impact did it cause, what issues is it related to. Again, I'll go over this later in the lecture. The second part is the application of key concepts and theories from this course to analyse the case study and issues that would be presented in the first section. So you will be looking to answer questions that naturally arise from this case study. How did it come to be? How do we understand it as a problem? Who is it impacted and why has it impacted them? Why is that an issue? Things like that. One member, again, will be predominantly responsible for this part, but you should be flexible. It is great to have others give feedback, and feedback's almost never a personal attack. So the member in charge of the first part might say, this is great, but the analysis didn't cover this point that I mentioned. Or the person in charge of the third part might say, I would like you to include this analysis because I think it would link really well to the recommendations I want to cover, something like that. And the final section is reserved for making recommendations and a conclusion based on the analysis, which will address how the issue could be resolved. This will be dependent on your understanding of part 1 and part 2, and this is why we consider all parts to be equally challenging and really important. They kind of set each other up to win. It would be a really good idea to decide quite quickly or early on how you intend to divide the labour, so who is focusing on what section, which I am encouraging collaboration and flexibility, but at the end of the day, each member needs to write and present one part of the assessment and your name will go on that part. So deciding early on who wants to do what will help the practical division of tasks like the slides and what literature to gather and focus on. But again, I'll go over that in a bit. We would like you to include scholarly literature, but you can also include non-scholarly resources if they are appropriate. For example, a newsletter would be acceptable, but not an Instagram or a Facebook post. Moving on, you will end up submitting a 15-minute video as a group and roughly an 800-word script individually, plus minus 10%. And this is due on or during week 9 on Thursday the 17th of April by 11:59 p.m. your standard Australian time, whatever that is. The way this assessment will be marked is by a group and an individual component. The total assessment is worth 40% of your final grade, and the group component is worth 25% of this assessment. So the presentation or video will be what is marked for this group component. Please also look over the assessment outline and the rubric. That is your responsibility, part of your responsibility for this task, but for now I'll just summarize it. So the main thing you will be marked on are the cohesiveness of the presentation. And this cohesiveness needs to be seen in pretty much all elements of the assessment. So from the clear presentation of the case study flowing into a clear and sophisticated analysis using concepts and theories to the overall evidence that was provided. One study used by one person shouldn't really contradict what another member is saying. Quality of the argument, effective presentation, so both the script and the visuals that you're using, and that the case and analysis flows and is coherent with the recommendations and conclusion at the end. The individual component is worth 15%. This will be marked using the script predominantly that you submit, but also the presentation and the slides that you've included in the recorded section, and the referencing in the slides, and at the end the references that are related to your part, and just the general way again that you've presented your research. It will roughly be 800 words. This is just because 800 times 3 makes up about 15 minutes worth of written component or content, which you would have used in the presentation, but again plus minus 10%. And your submission will be a Word document or a PDF containing this script, but this will only contain the script, the 800 words, and the references as well. You don't need to include images of the slides and your recorded presentation or the minutes of your presentation. We'll be able to know from the script which section of your video you presented and which slides then are yours, so don't stress about including everything. It's just the script you need to include or submit for this individual component. And this slide is just really providing a rough template for the structure of the video and the scripts. You can all include the introduction in the script that you submit if you would like. From the video as well, you can all present a part of the introduction if you would like. I think that would be kind of cute. Or one member can just present it. Then you can decide that as a group. So I just wanted to make sure you recognize that it should be done collectively, because it won't be going towards any one member's individual component and one member's individual mark if you present it. So you probably should all collectively work on it, considering that. This really just acts as a nice template, and I'd like you to keep it in mind for the information that I'm going to go over later in this lecture. But very basically, this is what you are required to submit. Okay, so the next part of this video is going to go over a suggested timeline for this project and ways in which you can collaborate really effectively with your group and have just a good time and get a good mark. Before I continue on with that though, I wanted to again say that I have posted a discussion board on Blackboard for you to post the topics and case studies in which you are more interested in, to let others know and ideally use that to inform the groups that you eventually make. It is week 3 now when I'm recording this, and no one has used that discussion board, which is totally fine. But in week 4 tutorials, we will be confirming the groups for this project. As part of that, please note that I highly recommend going to the week 4 tutorial because we will be confirming the groups for this assessment then. I don't want to be figuring out or following up who is going into which group any later than week 4, because that will just delay your ability to work on this assessment and not be very fair for your eventual group members and the people that did show up. So please be proactive at least about getting into groups. Even if you can't show up, make sure you communicate to someone that you would like this topic and you'd like to be in their group if it's similar to what they're interested in. The way we will be doing this in tutorials is that I will post on Blackboard, and I've emailed out a OneDrive file which will have a document for Perth students and Sydney students where you will be able to assign yourself to a group. You will be given time in tutorials to go over the assessment again, voice what topic or case study you're interested in, and see if there's others who would like to be in a group with you. From there, you can start to write down your group members and the topic onto this document. You have been provided a list of examples as well in the Assessment 2 file, or this list is also in the Week 4 tutorial slides for people who don't have access to Blackboard. And again, you don't need to stress too much about going over that right now and figuring out your topic now. You will be given time during tutorial to figure out what topic you're more interested in and which group you'd like to be in. Typically, groups are going to consist of 3 people so that it reflects the 3 parts of the assessment we went over. However, the class numbers for both Sydney and Fremantle look like we may have some groups of 2 or 4 people. It's hard to say if this will be the case because of the enrolment issues, but it just might be. If that happens, and it happens to you, Denise will send you and your group members an email addressing how you will complete this assessment so that it's fair. So it might just look a little bit different to what we've discussed today, but very similar. So please don't worry too much about it right now, as we might not have groups of 2 or 4 people, but if it does happen and it happens to be your group, Denise will contact you and we will sort that out. Also, I want everyone to be aiming to have groups of 3. I don't want to see that there's a group of 4 or a group of 2 in the same class when that could be 2 groups of 3. Whilst I would love you to be able to do a topic of your interest or just work with your friends, this assessment is designed for 3 people, so please aim to have a group of 3. And again, if you're not able to attend the tutorial in week 4, and have not assigned yourself to a group, you will be then allocated to a group either by Denise or myself in week 5. Something else I might do, which I forgot to mention in the last slide, is in week 4 or week 5, I will probably send out emails to people who have not attended tutorials, just to make sure you're still enrolled and attending this course if you're not allocated to this. And then through that we can confirm what group you want to be assigned to. And this is the link for assigning groups. This will be posted on Blackboard and should have also been emailed out to you with the week 4 content. So the reason I wanted to talk more about how you can effectively work as a team is because of that group mark that we've already gone over before. The idea and the research will be allocated more to the group work grade. So you do want to kind of prioritize working quite collaboratively in this assessment. To help with that, Denise actually first made these slides and these steps to break down how, as a researcher, she would approach this task to ensure everyone is heard and included and produces good work while still being able to complete your individual part of the assessment, like your part of the script, and also present your part of the assessment. So first things first, the first thing you will want to confirm as a group is how you plan to communicate. So on what platform, whether it be through emails, Teams, or Facebook, whatever it is. And also how you plan to share your work. So with a Google Drive, OneDrive, or other as well. Make sure this is clear to each member of the group and also accessible to each member of the group. It really impacts on the process if you can directly communicate or share files via a platform. If one member doesn't have Facebook, it doesn't make sense to then have Facebook be your primary communicating platform. Just make it something else so it's fair. During this step, it might also be good to confirm a regular time to meet, which works for everyone in the group. You might decide to meet once a week after class, maybe in the library for like 30 minutes to discuss what each other have been working on, how you're maintaining the cohesiveness, and what your plan is to work on until next time you meet. The meeting does not have to take up much time. It also doesn't have to be that regular, but I just find meeting with group members regularly helps to keep the progress of your project consistently going, because you kind of want to be able to present what you have been working on and your idea for something. During tutorials, I plan to have enough time for you and your groups to start to explore case studies that you might be interested in if you haven't already decided on a specific one, because you don't need to have decided on one. You can start to do preliminary research, keeping in mind that the case study needs to have the features of kind of key issues. Whilst it is nice, it does not really make sense to report on like a case study that has a happy ending per se for this assessment. It'll also need to be a case study that has key themes or ways in which concepts from this course can be applied. So quickly think in that tutorial, could some concepts I have already learned this semester be applied to this case study? If not, I would probably recommend looking for another one that you could apply concepts to. And all this work that you do will really set you up for step one, so identifying your case study. It does say studies, but I think just to maintain scope, one case study is plenty. You do not need to do two. Two and studies would be quite hard for the scope of this assessment. Step two goes beyond that preliminary search to gather case-specific scholarly and appropriately non-scholarly sources. You will have to likely do this outside of the tutorial. This is why meeting up or having a platform to communicate and share what you think will be really helpful. The reason I say appropriate non-scholarly literature is, for example, you might have to do or want to do your assessment on a recent case study which has no scholarly research on it yet. That is completely fine, of course, but the assessment does require scholarly research to be included. So you would then likely, for academic literature, find academic literature on similar case studies so that you can include that. Whilst you look at the similar case studies, you can have a think about how they were analysing the case or how they resolved the case, what recommendations they published. This might provide some direction on how you could complete your assessment and also provide justification for how you could complete it yourself, how you have completed it, sorry. So again, you would need non-scholarly in that case, but you would have to find scholarly research to support it. You can also do this even if you decide to do an older case study too. So have a look at the literature. What themes do people often bring up when discussing this case study? How do they analyze these themes typically? And what recommendations have already come up in the past? Part of this step, which is not specified here, is to also start reading that literature, because in step 3, you will ideally meet and share what you have found, which will help you to all identify the focus. So what parts of the case study are really significant and need to be highlighted, and the initial themes. So do the events in the case study relate to intergenerational justice or racism or environmental land rights or other concepts that we've explored? And also identify these themes and how they connect to the theoretical and conceptual lenses we've explored. If there are themes of racism, you can then connect the events to the environmental racism lens, for example, for further analysis, and that's kind of naturally how it will develop. These steps, I think, are really important for you because you will need to identify your scope for this assessment. So, for example, if you pick a case study of an environmental movement that went wrong, let's say, I have no example, but just in general, a movement that went wrong, you would either have to maintain its broadness, so you can analyze it as a whole movement and have broader recommendations for how that issue or what went wrong could be addressed. Or you would need to refine the whole movement into one or two specific events or examples, which you can then analyze and draw on recommendations that just address those specific parts. If you don't have a clear scope, it will be a lot more difficult for you and your group to know exactly what it is you are focusing on for the script and the presentation. Again, this sets you up for step 4, which is to return to the original research objective in a more focused way. So what is the focus regarding the case study, analysis and recommendations, and who is going to work more so on what part? There is a note here to also remind you that whilst in step 4 and step 5 you will be dividing up the roles, you still need to be aware of each other's parts because they will impact upon each other quite significantly. So the way the case study is discussed will impact the analysis, which will impact the recommendations. If I was wanting to write about a case study and I was doing that part of the assessment, I would want to know what my other team members were doing so that I could focus on particular things that align with their section, so with the analysis and with the recommendations, and vice versa for all of the parts as well. Again, whilst one person might mainly be doing the analysis section and even write and present most of it, the research and ideas make up most of the group mark. So you should all be somewhat involved, at least somewhat involved in establishing the main points of that analysis. Step 6 will involve the independent work, so working on your section, both the script and the slides. Once you have a draft of this section, it's always nice to get some feedback, so I recommend sharing it and providing feedback to each member so you can then refine what your final presentation will be. And sharing your script with each other is also really important because you want to make sure that no one's script accidentally differs from the presentation or misrepresents what the group presented and have collectively established for this assessment. I highly doubt one of you would do this, but I have seen cases where one person in a group kind of focuses more on their script and edits it without the group to try and get a higher mark for the individual component. Your marker will notice this and it will not be rewarded in grades. So please, if you do want to add something or take something away, address it with your team members and go that pathway. Oh yeah, you did accidentally leave this to the last minute, life happens, but part of your script is accidentally misinterpreted what other members were talking about. So you've done a different analysis or a different recommendation or a different part of your case study. Hopefully then during this revision and sharing process, someone will pick up on that and you can quickly address it and fix it in time for the presentation and final submission. The final step is completing the assessment, so recording your presentation, your section, and converting it to an MP4 and then submitting it. I'm going to assume that most of you will share a PowerPoint. Because of this, it would likely be easier for you all to record your section onto the PowerPoint and then export it as one video. This is because the submission instructions are that one member from the group will submit the video presentation, meaning it really does have to be one video that you submit. And this will be via one submission portal, and then each member of the group will individually submit their script, and this is via another submission portal on Blackboard. You could alternatively record using Zoom so that it's one video, so you have a meeting on Zoom and just share your screen and then download the MP4 video that Zoom will provide you. The reason it has to be MP4 or similar, and I'll go over the alternative formats in a couple slides, is because that's what can be uploaded to Blackboard and turn it in. So just make sure you don't also leave exporting it to the last second and submit it late. It happens quite often, you'd be surprised. Just make sure you allow it enough time because particularly with PowerPoint, it will take a while to export. To provide more detail on step 5, something that might help make you make sure you are all involved in the analysis but don't kind of take over one individual's component of this assessment is if you all read one source about the conceptual or theoretical analysis approach that you are taking. That way you can share your interpretations, you can hear each other out, add or take away points that are relevant, unrelevant, and address any conflicts or misunderstandings that kind of pop up. It's very unlikely, it very rarely happens, but if you do disagree with part of the analysis or any part of the assessment, meeting as a group is a great way to resolve it, because it is most likely just a difference in interpretation, which is fine and you can quite easily resolve, or a misunderstanding, which you can address as well. Another tip which I always find really helpful during assessments is to think about my reader or my audience. So think, what is really important about this case that someone needs to know, and how can I effectively communicate that? Or what is a really interesting analysis point to capture my reader's attention, and how will it then open up really interesting recommendations? This will help you to just engage with this project, hopefully have some fun as well, and more so, it'll be more so than just establishing who does what and then not talking until week 9 when it's due. Another tip is to write some subheadings, like the first one can be case study and main ideas, or background and main ideas. Next one can be conceptual analysis of main ideas, and then the final one could be conclusion and recommendations that address these main ideas. Then in each section, you could briefly write what you think should be in it, like the example here. So not just writing the anthropocentrism under the second subheading, or, a note for yourself, discuss the anthropocentrism here, but writing anthropocentrism is a key driver of the production and disposal of clothing waste because X and Y. That way, as a group, you know the main points each other will focus on, or at least for that moment, what the main points you will focus on, and you can all go off from that. So your goal for the second meeting is to not just know who is doing what, but what is being done. What are the key points that are going to be addressed in each section? And leaving that meeting, you should really feel like you have a great direction to complete your component. This is just a slide with those steps broken into weeks leading up to week 9 when it's due. You could screenshot this and put it into your shared document just as kind of a brainstorm stimulant for how you will maintain this consistent progress. So going off this, okay, step 5, we should meet. What time in week 7 could we meet up? Things like that. Whilst I am sure you all know how to do this, Denise has kindly made a video going over how you can export a PowerPoint recording into an MP4 video. Alternatively, like I said, you could use Zoom, and you could also upload the video to one of the members' YouTube accounts and then submit the link. That's totally fine. It's how I do it with my lectures. Or you could make a Vimeo. It just has to be submitted through a media that can be uploaded to turn it in. That's the only requirement, really. And before I finish, I wanted to also address that if you still don't have access to Blackboard by week 9, we will manage this. So you will likely do something similar to what we have been doing, where you email me your submission and I upload it for you. Please remember also to email Denise if you have any concerns about this assessment, or also foresee yourself needing an extension. Again, I'm not able to provide too much, and I'm not able to approve of extensions as well. So again, just remembering who it is you should email for the most effective response. You can always email me if you need particular feedback or things like that after the assessment is marked and you get your grades as well. I love this slide. She's included it. It's really cute. So go forth, and I'll see you in week 4 tutorials, and we can establish those groups and get you started on this assessment.